Welcome to this oral presentation about the study called The Influence of Classroom Practicum in Preserving Teachers' Identity Construction during the pandemic COVID-19 in the Foreign Language Program at the University of Pamplona. My name is Leonardo Duran and my partner is San Martinez. We're going to talk about Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 of this research. And also we are going to explain the experiences in the collection process. And finally, we will do a summary to conclude this presentation. To identify the influence that the practical environment has on the construction of teaching identity is the purpose of the research. This analysis has been done during the Preservist Teaching Practicum. For this study, it's the lack of information on how identity is shaped in Preservist Teaching Practicum that makes a strong argument for this research. Study sites in this research show that, of course, there is a change in the professional's identity that is modified by the environment. However, they affirm that more research is needed to understand this phenomenon. For this opportunity, the pandemic situation gave us perfect conditions to study the shaping of teacher identity in a pandemic context.
In order to continue, I would like to talk about the research questions. The Grand Tour question aims to identify the way in which the teacher identity construction is influenced by the practical environment during the Preservist teaching in a virtual environment. Moreover, there are three sub-questions. The first sub-question is, why is online classroom practice conceived as a space for the Preservist teacher identity construction? The second question is, what aspects can influence the change of professional perspective of the trained teachers during their practice? And the last sub-question is, how are the Preservist teacher educational beliefs affected by its virtual, cultural, and economic environments? Now, I would like to talk about the objectives of this inquiry. The main objective is focused on identifying the influence of classroom practicum during Preservist teacher practices in the process of teachers' identity construction in a pandemic situation. Moreover, we have established three specific objectives. The first specific objective is to examine how online practice environment intervene in the construction of identity. The second specific objective is focused on identifying the aspects that influence the change of professional perspective of the trained teachers. And the last specific objective aims to assess the effects that virtual, cultural, and economic environments have on Preservist teachers' educational beliefs.
Within the theoretical framework of the research can be found the theories of professional identity, identity agency, foreign language environment, foreign language teacher beliefs, and cognitivism. These theories explain the development of teachers' identity and the influence of the environment on identity, also the learning environment of foreign language, and the way in which an interaction can be carried out in digital terms.
About the literature review, we have added all those studies that shared the topic and the main objective with our inquiry. Those studies are the following: Nyantai 2017, Mukherjee 2017, Yuan Liu and Li 2019, Shaban Duan Sherif 2019. I would like to add that we have changed one case study as you suggested. This one was Yuan, Liu, and Lin 2019.
The philosophical strategy that has been guiding this study is the qualitative research, and together with the constructivist worldview, they study the experiences of the participants in a natural environment. The phenomenological design was chosen to conduct the research for two principal aspects. The first one is that true information could be collected about the perspectives and experiences of the participants. And second, this design have the possibility to adapt to the interaction limitations that caused the COVID-19 pandemic.
This case study was designed to be developed in the University of Pamplona. This university has several number of programs which are divided in 7 faculties. Now, this inquiry was focused on the Faculty of Education, and to be specific, in foreign language degree. This inquiry aimed to analyze and study the students of 10th semester known as pre-service teachers. These pre-service teachers from the University of Pamplona and their willing participation as a target population was a relevant aspect to take into account for the development of this inquiry. The participation of 6th, 10th semester foreign language students pre-service teachers was voluntary. Furthermore, this inquiry followed the ethical considerations given that the participants who agreed to cooperate, they signed a format to know all their rights during the development of this inquiry. Because this inquiry seeks through the willing and availability participants' participation.
One limitation that arises when collecting information from the sample is that a pandemic situation does not allow personal contact with participants. So to overcome this adversity, this study has been using questionnaires and semi-structured interviews for the data gathering process. For example, online questions for gathering information from individuals are perfect tools in this situation. The most important advantage of these online questions is that individuals can take them from electronic devices, and they can also choose the place and the time to the questionnaires. In the semi-structured interviews, to address in more detail issues that this study is taking, we have used open-ended question because this method is able to change according to the participants' answers. What is really worthy for this data collection process. The way in which those interviews have been done, it's through interview. It's a type of synchronous communication. For this study, the Skype platform is being used to develop the interviews, and we have recorded the audio of the conversation for having evidence.
The validation process was complex, given that it required the participation of 2 professors who were focused on identifying and detecting those possible mistakes in the data collection instruments, such as the structure of the ideas, the structure of the question, and the vocabulary implemented in each question. This process aimed to detect those mistakes which could be an obstacle to achieve the objective of this case study. In order to provide a sampling related to the validation process in the questionnaire, I would like to share with you this table in which it is possible to appreciate the question before and after the validation process and the observation suggested by the professor. And of course, we had this experience in the semi-structured interview too. So, the question before the validation, the observation, and the question after the validation with the correction suggested by the professor. The piloting was an important stage for the data collection process, given that the piloting allowed us to know what aspect must be improved and why. For example, we realized that we must use Skype in order to contact the participants and to record the interview. Also, we understood that it is important to avoid the interruption in the conversation or in the interview in order to gather the whole experience for the participants. So this piloting was an important feedback to conduct and implement the data collection instruments. This sampling is related to the questionnaire during the piloting process and all the aspects that we take into account. For example, the online platform, the questions, the comprehension of the question, and the objectives. And of course, we implemented the piloting process in the interview. As you can see on the screen, we decided to use in the first time the platform Zoom, but given those internet connection issues, we decided to change it for Skype, which worked better.
The data collection process has been successful for this study. Within this process, there have been elements that have marked these experiences. For example, the participants have been then semester students who are in their practicum stage. When contacting, they immediately agree to participate in the research. They argue that in their stage of collecting information, it was difficult to find participants, so they wanted to help. The protocol for the interviews is simple. First, a grading is given and the participants are informed about the anonymity of the information collected. Then the interviews takes place and finally thanks are given for their participation. The discernment of doubts is a stage that have marked this data collection process. Many participants stated that they didn't know what to respond to the question. So not only was the question explained to them, but an imaginary situation, an imaginary scenario was given where the questions were exemplified for a better understanding. Natural questions. Well, the interviews were carried out in the mother tongue. With this, we were able to create an environment of thoughts for the participants to respond in a natural way. Furthermore, before the interviews, they are given the guide to respond according to their thoughts and experience. Okay, we as researchers are satisfied with the data obtained. The purpose of this study is to investigate the influence of the practicum places have in the development of teachers' identity. And for this, it is necessary to talk about many factors such as cultural aspects, economic conditions, interactions, virtuality, among others. These responses were successfully obtained from the participants. They talked about their beliefs before the practicum stage, also about the clash between their thoughts and the real life. They also spoke about the cultural environment of their students, the limitations of connectivity, and limitations in interaction. So they emphasize how this entire context of pandemic is affecting their growth as teachers. Of course, these are the answers that this study seeks to respond. Now, I would like to present you a short piece from an interview conducted in the recollection process.
Porque no es lo mismo, no es lo mismo, o sea, no es lo mismo de caminar por el ambiente, por el salón de clase, preguntar y mirar directamente, crear un contacto visual con los estudiantes para darles como esta confianza y esta seguridad a los estudiantes para que participen, porque muchas veces yo pregunto en equation o algo así, ellos se quedan callados, pero yo por ejemplo digo María, algo así, denos un ejemplo, y se queda callada y dice, profe, no entendí. Entonces como que, ¿por qué no preguntó? ¿O por qué no nos dijo tal cosa? Entonces por la cuestión de eso, o sea, como solamente en la pantalla, como no comparte pantalla, solamente en la pantalla sale 3 estudiantes y muchas veces son solamente los nombres porque apaga la cámara y eso, entonces no sabemos si está nadie, no sabemos si están poniendo atención o algo, entonces sí hace falta, sí nos hace.
Now, I would like to talk about the impressions related to the data collection process. First of all, I would like to say that the participant answers were complete, were complex, and we hope the answers were honest enough. Even if we haven't analyzed the data yet, we think that the objective of this case study were reached because based on what we listened in the interview and based on what we saw in the questionnaire, the answers were appropriate. Related to the interaction and the relationship with the participants, the interaction was good enough. It was based on the respect and the confidence. Given that this inquiry seeks to the willing and availability participants' participation. Furthermore, our perspective about the data collection process changed because we thought that it was disgusting, it was a little bit confusing, it was a little bit frustrating because at the beginning we had to contact each participant and to create a schedule in order to do the interviews and to remember them to do or to develop the questionnaire. But now our perspective or our opinion about the data collection process is that it depends of how and when we do or we conduct the data collection instruments. It was good enough at the end, so we are really satisfied about our experience in this aspect. I would like to share with you an extract of one interview in order to show you how the participant emphasized on those aspects that could influence the pre-service teacher's identity construction. For example, understanding the school context, teacher's role, teaching methodologies, and to detect those needs which exist in the teaching of English. So these factors could be a positive or a detrimental experience for the pre-service teacher.
In summary, the purpose of the research is to discover how the practice environment influences the construction of teachers' identity. However, the pandemic situation has made this study uses methodologies of interaction but not direct contact. In that order of ideas, the instruments for data collection were designed to overcome the condition of social isolation. The system was successfully developed in the data collection process, obtaining the desired answers. Besides, this pandemic context represents an opportunity to study practical environments and their influence on the shaping of teachers' identity. Thank you for listening.